Okay, I think I may have answered this one. If we now look at common questions, and these are really common, you get them all the time. Do I have to provide antennas for users close to base station? I think I've already sort of illustrated to you that there's so few that close that it makes sense to provide all of them with it. Let's face it, even the guy that's in the second level and still gets good service, the customer's always going to be happy. If you've got a lot of guys there, you're already halving the capacity of your base station. So you can't look at problems. So to go do a case-by-case evaluation to save 5% of installation, that's sort of roughly what it comes down to, is just not useful. It's a complexity that makes no sense. What makes sense, sell a guy with a voucher or something, and you make sure that an external antenna is put up. It's not like an option or gift, or when the guy buys a bigger package, it services the operator. Don't think of it as servicing the customer. Okay, so that's the best way to do it, and you'll make better profits, as we've shown, regardless of the cost of putting it on every single house. Yes, this is the strange enough the one, and I've had cases speaking to local operators, like I say, very clever guys, make no mistake, where the infrastructure guys understand perfectly what I'm saying, and they will openly say to me, look, they understand what I'm saying, but they can't do much about this. They handle infrastructure, so they figure out ways to increase network capacity using microcells, many different technologies, etc. What people do with consumers is not their business, and even in their own organization, I find it difficult to try to sell this across the barriers, but of course, it needs to be done. In that case, I find if they actually create a division or special part in fixed wireless access, and in my opinion, take a little bit of spectrum, because with, like I say, often there's 25% of your spectrum, you'll be able to serve the same amount of customers as with the other 75% service the mobile users. So take it off, because then you can make that spectrum fully efficient, because even mobile users, of course, impact on a fixed wireless service. If you're only doing fixed wireless, you've got control over the capacity. You can decide how many people are there. They're always in there. You've got lots of other advantages in terms of your parameters that you can set in LTE, which is geared for fast changing signals. So you can reduce forward error correction. You can reduce guard bands. You can reduce the number of tones to do frequency equalization, time equalization, and in that way already get about a 50% increase. So very good idea to actually have it as a separate offering, using the same base stations and equipment, but having almost a separate price offering, separate division handling it that does fixed wireless, because they will immediately understand that to get max out of whatever you allocate for fixed wireless, they need to do this. There would be no doubt about it. So mixing it often dilutes benefits, and it causes confusion, because we're talking to people historically where increasing signal strength on CPEs was never an option. It was always here to live with whatever the mobile devices would give you. Health problems is one of my favorites. I think I've often been asked about health due to radiation from cellular towers, and there's been no scientific proof that this happens, but many people believe it does. So it does provide a nice selling argument. Of course, outdoor antennas reduces the amount of cellular radiation you're exposed to considerably, because the outdoors are already about 10 times further away from you. It gives you 100 times less exposure, and of course the outdoors still have to penetrate house and so forth. So outdoor antenna certainly makes tons of sense to people that's worried about health issues. And let's face it, who knows, perhaps it may be right. I'm saying there's no evidence. One never, of course, ultimately knows whether there's some impact. I personally don't believe in it, but it sells. Then there's the last part, residential regulations. That's often an issue in terms of installing outdoor antennas. And this often comes from people installing satellite dishes and big Yagi antennas for terrestrial TV. So that's often why the restriction applies. But if it's a restriction, I think one of the ideas is, of course, using nice panel antennas. If you look at your typical cross-pole antennas like Export 2, Export 1, and you don't need to install them on masts protruding up from the roof. We find you get quite adequate service if you install them below the roof eaves. If you got a typical house. So in other words, at the lowest part of the roof, under the roof, and then they're not really that visible. Sometimes there's even just plainly objections in some estates, especially private estates. And there one can even use something like the X-Pole 1. X-Pole 1 is capable of being pole mounted, wall mounted, but many people forget it's also got 4 suckers and you can mount it against the window. And people also forget you can turn it 180 around, so you can mount it against an internal window. Now, believe it or not, that still gives you about a 10 to 15 dB signal if that window is in the quadrant towards a cell phone tower. I don't want to say it loud, but I had signal problems now, and I almost wish to show you a photograph. I've got a hotspot here with my cell phone. It's sitting against the window. Gives me about 5 times increase in speed by positioning it against my window, as opposed to just having it indoor with me. So that is still a very, very good solution, even though it's technically indoor. It behaves almost like an outdoor antenna, just a little bit lower. And of course, the gain there is fairly omnidirectional. Now we're hitting the questions. I'm hoping that many of you, I've got no visibility of chat boxes and so forth. So I'm just handing over to Elana to see what questions there are. We've got some other panelists. Thank you very much, people of Australia and other parts of Australasia. We also wish to indicate sympathy and strength if any of you have had any problems with the COVID virus. I think we're all suffering from it. Hope you all stay healthy and well.